we gathered some information from the men's varsity baseball and men's varsity soccer and women's varsity soccer. Our hypothesis was if teams practice many times and work productively, then the effect on their game performance will improve because they will be rewarded with their effort by winning the game. For example, the soccer team practices every day from school from an entire week of 12.5 hours, which shows their willingness to take effort and participate in the game. When we went and researched on the timings and game scores, it presented an idea of applied research because it goes in depth of the varsity team workouts and practical usages. With data like these, it is possible to figure out how the practice timings can affect the scores and result of games. This will help prove our hypothesis. The women's varsity soccer and men's varsity baseball had made it to playoff because with their time and effort in their practices. Some confounding variables to consider is how effectively the teams are productive when they're practicing. We later took some surveys on how people felt about practices and how they had different opinions on how they practiced. Another confounding variable that affected the practice time during the practice is the weather. On rainy days, the practices were shortened. The next confounding variable is the player's injury. If they had been injured, they would not have been able to play and participate in the game. With these variables, it is possible to combine the data and find patterns on whether they're positive correlation or negative correlation based on the games they won. For example, the teams that had a higher practice time had higher positive results in their games. The dependent variable in this experiment is the games won, the ones that were measured. The independent variable is the practice time, the one that is being manipulated. Some things to consider like experimental bias, which is an unconscious act, and it matters here because players in the team can change their views while they're practicing. There are some critical thinking involved in here by discovering the true practice of the soccer team and how genuine they are when they're practicing. The standard deviation can be found using the mean and with variation of dispersion of a set of data values. The mean of the graph is the average time with the games won and the amount of practice time. The mode can be affected by the repetition of the games won with the practice time when the practice time is consistent. The median is when the middle of the games won, and you can set all those in a list and find out when were they effective the most, which is in the middle. Another confounding variable is the false consensus effect, because since everyone says soccer is the best sport, the players in the team will say soccer is the best. Everyone in the women's varsity soccer would say that the women's soccer team is the best. Same goes for baseball. We took random assignment by asking all the people in the varsity baseball how effective the practice time affected their game performance in their games.
So after researching and collecting data from teams, we found that baseball's record was 17-10, followed by girls soccer at 21-1, and men's soccer at 7-7, and they all practiced about the same amount of hours, with men's soccer at 12.5 and girls soccer and baseball at about 10. Some variables that you can look at are the amount of games played is more for baseball and less for soccer, and that's just how the sport is, and that would throw off the correlation looking at practice times and wins. For instance, baseball would have 17 because they played 27 games, but soccer only had 7, but they only had 14. So it's hard to look at the number of hours practiced with the number of wins, along with all the variables that have to come into it, such as baseball, soccer, and men's and women's soccer both being outside.
So this is a histogram of the wins for the teams and the hours practiced per week. And as you can see, there's very little correlation between the hours practiced per week and the wins that they received, because the team that practiced the most, being men's soccer, won the least games, and the team that practiced in the middle won the most. And this is the normal distribution graph with a mean of 15 and standard deviation of 6.
And here's the correlation graph. You can, for the positive correlation here, it goes from all the way to the top, and it doesn't matter because this doesn't really affect the mean. And from this, we can conclude that more practices that the teams do after school can affect the amount of games they win.